This meeting is being recorded.
Hello, everyone, and thanks for joining my session here today at the Product Led Summit. My name is Marcus Andrews, and I'm a Principal Product Marketing Manager at HubSpot. I've been doing product marketing for about 8 years now. I started at a startup called Wildfire, and it was acquired by Google and worked at Google for a long time, did it there, and then joined HubSpot about 3.5 years ago, and I'm doing product marketing here. And I'm really excited to be part of this talk and this session because I think that a lot of the talks are geared towards becoming a product-driven company from a product perspective and from a product and engineering perspective. But today I'm going to talk about how marketers and marketing in general can have a really, really big impact on your growth and really your identity in becoming a product-led and a really product-driven company, and why that's so important and why that can have a really, really big impact on the kind of company that you become and the kind of growth that you achieve. And so I've got some slides here today that I put together for the talk, and I'm going to run you through them. This talk is sort of a companion talk to a piece I wrote for the startup, which you can check out as well. It dives into a lot of things. This is going to go pretty fast, and so you can read that and kind of get a more in-depth answer. You can always reach out to me and talk about this sort of stuff. I love talking about it. If you're interested in how you can apply it to your own business, or you have questions about it, or you have ideas, you got some content you want to work on, please let me know, and I'd be excited to talk about it. Okay, so let's get into the talk today. All right, so like I mentioned, this is really all about product marketing strategy and how you can become a product-driven company at your own business. So every product and every company has a story and a message that they are putting out into the market, right? And usually this comes from the marketing team. A lot of companies spend a lot of time in this. Some companies don't spend a lot of time in this, but you've always got a message and a story that you're telling. And it's really along this spectrum. So you can have a story that you tell that's really driven by the product, what you sell, what you make, the features, the individual components of that thing, whatever it is, be it software or hardware or services, products, whatever it is. And then there's a story that you can tell that's really driven by the market. And a really market-driven story is something that talks about the larger narrative that you're part of, that you kind of plug into the bigger story, what's happening in your industry, the problems that you solve, those sort of things, right? And every company kind of falls somewhere along this line in the message that they create, that they produce. There's also kind of another spectrum that I think when you put these two spectrums together, they form kind of this cool matrix here. And that's that everybody's story is either, very compelling and interesting and exciting, or it's not so much, right? It's a little bit boring. It's not as interesting. It's not as exciting, and same, just likewise, every company falls in this spectrum as well. And so usually what happens with companies and kind of their life cycle is that you have an idea, right? You're a startup founder, you're an entrepreneur, you have some kind of cool idea. It's generally really interesting and really compelling. If it's a good idea, if it's not a good idea, it's probably, not going to go anywhere to begin with. But it's also probably very, very product or market driven. And this makes sense, right? You've got an idea for a startup. It's because you're in an industry or there's a need out in the world, and you have this idea for how to solve it and how to turn that solution into a business. So this is great. This makes sense. This is where ideas usually start. The problem is that most startups usually kind of fall down into this really market-driven, really kind of boring area with their story. And I think that, your average ho-hum startup that you see that kind of comes along, they all kind of, some of them sound very similar. They're all talking about changing the world or solving a problem in the same way. They're really, really market-driven usually, where they're not talking about their product or features yet because maybe they're pre-product or maybe they only have a few features. They would rather make their story much more about the market and where it is and the problem they're solving than about what they actually have. The big problem is that just, they're not as interesting as they could be at this point. And so any good marketer is going to come into your startup or into your company, and they're going to want to move you up, right? And so let's tell a really great story. Let's be more interesting. Let's create content that is people really, really want to download and read and engage with. Let's create stories that our sales teams can tell over and over again and really, really get people excited and motivated about whatever it is that we do. That's what marketers do. That's what people will come in and they will want to help you with, right? This is what I do at HubSpot. I'm a product marketer. And so that is kind of the point, right? But I want to talk about a few examples here and kind of where they fall in this metric before I get into the next phase of this. So Google is a company that everybody knows. Everybody probably has an opinion about them. And the argument that I would make with Google is that they are really good at launching products and they do some really compelling launches. And I think they're getting much, much better at telling an interesting story. But they've also just got a very product-driven culture and engineering culture that's very, very product-driven. They really focus on building awesome products that really solve the solution really, really well. That is great. I think it gives them, customers who are extremely happy with their product, and they have low churn on things like, their Gmail products and cloud products and their AdWords products. Everything that they do is just really tremendous. But often the launches that they have for their products aren't as interesting as some other companies. They don't really get into the market dynamics and narrative and storytelling that people really crave and help them understand big ideas or kind of capture their interest and pull them in. Google doesn't do a ton of that, right? So I would say they're, really product driven. I probably should have moved them even further to the left here, to be honest. And they're not boring. I don't think by any means they tell a boring story, but they're probably only a little bit above, the average mark when they're telling a good story. But Google does it really, really well. I just think they're kind of in this part of the bucket. Another example is the company I work at, HubSpot, right? We are historically, even we've done a ton to really invest in our products and build out our product team and build a really world-class product. But historically, we come from a sales and marketing and service space where we want to be the best storytellers in the world. We really want to have these big launches. We want our marketing and our voice to be really rooted in the market and tell these really, really interesting stories. And so we tell really great, compelling stories, but we definitely are more market-driven than product-driven. And so this is kind of where we fall, I would say, with our product launches and the work that we do. And there's sort of this imaginary line that I think runs through diagonally this matrix, right? And really everything above the line is really, really hard to do. And everything below the line is easier to do. And what I mean by that is that it's easier to tell a really compelling story and to kind of move up here into this region when you have a story that's really, really market driven, right? If you're telling a story and if you're crafting marketing material you're only talking about what the market is super interested in, it's easier to tell a story that's really, really highly compelling, right? And you don't have to talk about your features or your products or the things that you're building. The problem with this is that, most marketers, every marketer is trying to go up, right? We're trying to tell more compelling stories. So there's this natural pull to kind of move to the right in this matrix and really embrace the market. But what happens is when you forget about the product and you stop thinking about the product in your marketing message, it leads to things like, high churn and bad expectations. You have something that sells and that's interesting, but the customer experience ultimately isn't very good because, you've created a story that you can't really back up when it comes down to the end of the day. And that is a very bad place to be. You do not want to be there. This happens to a ton of startups. There's countless examples of companies that, have created a story or tapped into a narrative and they really can't back it up with their product. And those companies maybe get some traction at first and are newsworthy and have some buzz, but ultimately fizzle out. And so what I think great marketers do and what great companies do, and companies that are really, really product driven, is that they move up over time. Maybe they have an idea and then they become a startup. And they don't just go up, they also go to the left, right? And so you start to tell more compelling, more interesting marketing stories, but you also do it in a way that's really product driven. And that's really what is my goal here at HubSpot and kind of the work that I've been doing for a number of years is to figure that out. It's harder when you tell these really product driven stories, but ultimately it's better for the company, it's better for the customer, and it's going to grow your business in a better way. And so I think one really great example of that is Apple, especially 5 or 10, even 10 years ago, Apple has always been a tremendous storyteller. They've always really tapped into narratives and had exciting launches, but they do it in a way that's really product driven. And if you think about, like the launch of the iPad or the iPhone or the iPod, those stories and those launches from Steve Jobs and the entire crew there tapped into really, really important kind of modern stories that were interesting and relevant to everyone, but they immediately went into the product. You look back at the keynotes that are on YouTube around some of these Apple keynotes, and they're really, really product driven, but then they also they're really, really narrative driven and really, really interesting and really, really capture your attention. But then they could just go immediately into the product. And they did an amazing job of tying those two things together and telling a really product story. I don't think you ever want to go too far to the left. You don't want to just talk about your product, because then it's almost impossible to make it interesting. But you want to kind of be in this sweet spot where Apple is, right? Really, really interesting, really, really product driven, because they have, they have this legion of fans that were obsessed with their product, that knew everything about their product, even though there was a time when Apples were really, really hard to use and people are like, I'll stick with my PC, it's easier. But they were able to break through that kind of with their marketing, with their storytelling. And they did it in a way that was super product driven. So that is kind of just a device that I use to think about the world and to think about what it means to be product driven and why you would do this in the first place. It's really, really easy to drift to the right, and that's what most companies do. And in most companies, you have a separation between your product organization and your marketing organization. And the marketing organization is constantly trying to go up, and so they look for the easiest path of resistance, and they move to the right. And the product organization is really trying to build, cool products, right, and make really interesting for the customers. You unite those two things, you move up, but also to the left. You're going to grow better, you're going to go stronger, you're going to grow faster, you're going to reduce churn, people are going to believe in your marketing message much, much more. And that's really why I advocate product marketing. I think today it's so important because everybody is really smart and technically savvy, and so they can see through marketing that isn't back to the product. And so if you can do this early in your life cycle as a company, the earlier the better. Okay. So the next part of this is that I want to talk about building an identity and as a way to align the factors inside of your organization. So Elon Musk made this really great point that the biggest challenge that companies face today is that they just trying to get everybody inside of your company as you grow to row in the same direction, so that there's some sort of plan or like fabric that everybody knows about. And they all use this when they make decisions. So if you're trying to make a decision, if you have an identity, you can call it a brand or a mission or whatever you want, and everybody believes in the same thing and kind of thinks about the same things when they make decisions, you end up having people kind of unite and push in the same direction. Because otherwise what you have here is this misaligned vector situation, right? So you could have a ton of really smart people who are really good at what they do, but ultimately, if they're going in even slightly different directions, the impact that they have won't be as strong. And so what the best case scenario is that you have your vectors aligned, you maximize impact, everybody's rowing in the same direction, and you're able to kind of push through this. So what I think the best way to align vectors is to really build a strong identity at your company, and to do it through a product-driven identity, right? So when everybody is thinking about the product as the root of everything that they do, especially in the marketing organization, for instance, but also in other teams like sales and service, and they think about the product and they start from the product and then build their narratives, build their sales enablement material, build their onboarding, build their pitches and QBRs. It'll really change the company, and everybody will look through that lens of the product as they make decisions, and it'll really help you build this product-driven identity at your company, and it helps you become a product-driven company. And so having that identity and thinking about it that way is super important. This is another big part of my job as a product marketer at HubSpot and product marketers in general. I think this is how this is a huge thing that they focus on. This is a little piece of strategy that I put together to kind of guides that I've just learned along my years in product marketing that I think you can use to guide people at your organization. You don't necessarily have to hire a product marketer. I think people who've done product marketing probably great fit, but you definitely it's definitely good to have acquisition marketers, people thinking about new user acquisition, but you definitely want to hire some marketers who are great writers, who are great content creators, who understand brand and design, are good salespeople, can talk to customers, can get out there in the press and win some buzz for your customer, and also, just be great top of funnel marketers. It's great to have those people understand product marketing and have this kind of product marketing view on the world. And so you can hire someone who's been a product marketer, or you can just hire these kind of, creative brand focused marketers and plug them into a structure like this. So it's really product focused. So the way I think about building a really strong product marketing team is kind of through this pyramid, right? And it's a hierarchy of needs situation. So you can't move from one step until you've accomplished the next step. So first and foremost, product marketers really have to establish a tight connection with their product managers, so the product teams that they work with. And this basically means that these product marketers could step in as a product manager if they needed to, right? If the product manager doesn't show up one day and there's something big, the PMM could almost come in and replace them. Not really, but they know the product well enough. They know the roadmap well enough. They understand. They have the same vision. They have very similar goals. It's a different skill set. But these people understand each other. It's kind of two sides of the same coin in some places. A lot of the time, product org is bigger than the product marketing org, and that's fine. That's all about scale. That makes sense. But having that product relationship is super important, and it's really just about that marketer absorbing the product, learning about it, pitching it, using it, and really being part of it. The second is kind of this bucket that I could title research. So this is just, once you've established that foundation with your product team, product marketers really, really need to be smart people who understand the market really, really well. So they understand the trends, the things that customers care about in this market, the total addressable market, what's new, what's interesting, what's changed in the last 5 years, what's going to change in the next 5 years. That is the kind of knowledge that makes product marketers really smart, right? So this is competitive intel. This is developing a point of view on the market, probably through written. This is data analysis. You do want to have this strong kind of research motion into your team. And once you have these two things, once you have great product knowledge, you've established this great research, you want to build a narrative, right? And this is, I think, what most people associate with product marketers is that messaging work, value prop creation, being able to build a pitch, doing solution selling and solution marketing. These are really the hallmarks of great product marketers, but you have to have the other two steps before you can get to this one. And so I think that, this really comes from experience, but there's some great tactics that we use here at HubSpot and I've used along my career. I think writing mock stories about the ideal customer, doing persona research, and then writing a story about how, a fictitious customer would use this product and what do they do? What are the challenges that they have? How do they use the product? How do they hear about it? How do they get into it? What were the steps? Was there a methodology that they used along the way? These are all really important process. Writing that story. There's also a lot of good messaging guides and messaging briefs and kind of structures with different chapters and different elements that you can put together that are super useful. I do those for all our product launches, for all our products. I have some examples of those if you reach out to me. And then finally, there's launch, right? And so when you launch a product, this is usually campaign driven. A lot of the time, I skipped a step out there. From narratives, there's cross-team, right? So cross-team is really the cross-functional element of product marketing. So product marketers are extremely cross-functional team. I think having this is really, really important, right? They're a cross-functional team because they sit in between product and marketing, but they're also a really cross-functional team because Good product marketing teams are talking to your blog team, they're talking to your brand team, they're talking to your SEO and user acquisition team. They're talking to all these different teams and making sure that they're kind of a connecting fabric between the product and the marketing message. So this is super important. And finally, at the very top of the pyramid are product launches, which is, I think, what a lot of people also think of with product teams. This is really, or product marketing teams, this is really campaign-driven, big launches where you unite the entire team around something new that you have in product. It's very narrative-driven, very tied to the product. This is a great tactic for kind of moving up in that matrix I showed, but also to the left. All right, so we're almost done here. Just to recap, I think it's really, really important to align the vectors inside of your company. And you gotta really focus and think about this identity or brand that you have at your company. I would suggest that you build it around the product. I think that's the kind of way that modern companies work, but it's unique to everybody, right? And so finding this identity and this mission, you may already have, but spending time on it is super important. Really aligning, maximize those vectors, maximize that impact. And then the other thing is just to see if I left this out. I did. The other thing, the other things I would recommend is just use the hierarchy of needs to really align your marketing team, and then give yourself an assessment. Look at where your company falls in this matrix and try and figure out are you super market driven? Are you super product driven? How interesting are you? How boring? And just be honest with yourself. Ask other people, and then try and figure out the best way to move up into the left. So I am Marcus Andrews. I write and talk about product marketing, being product driven. I would love to connect with people. My email is on there. My Twitter handle is on there. So if you have any questions, let me know. But yeah, hopefully you found this talk informative, and there's a good complimentary piece on the startup that you can check out as well. Enjoy the rest of the sessions. Thanks for watching.